Alright, and here we are on Xcode 16 beta. I believe this is beta 2, but it should work across pretty much any versions of Xcode and hopefully lower deployment targets as well. So let's say in a situation where you want to have a compose button similar to Twitter at the bottom right of the view. And the funny thing is about picture-in-picture for iPhone is that since this is still a UI tab bar item behind the scenes for SwiftUI, it still respects the safe area, or the picture-in-picture still respects the safe area of the view and doesn't overlap over these tab items. And so you can imagine this situation where if you want to create your own tab bar item or your own tab bar SwiftUI view, SwiftUI no longer knows what is tab bar and what isn't. And really, from what I know, there's no really way to really specify an actual UI tab bar item, because I think you still have to specify the actual UI tab bar view controller and everything else behind that, which is too much, especially when you get this dealing with the selection stage and everything. So how can we make this a little bit easier so that we know that everything below here, anything right here, is a safe area to a picture-in-picture view or to other overlapping views within iOS that I don't know the name of. Within actual iOS 17.0 in the edition of macOS 15 or Xcode 15 of last year, you are able to actually specify a edge padding within a SwiftUI view as simple as you would an actual UI view controller. But what ends up happening is that this is actually a modifier of, if I can actually find it, of course, but this is actually a modifier of iOS 17. So if you have lower deployment targets, for example, if we're going 16, if you're still doing 15, wherever else, comes an annoyance because now we don't really, or you don't really have yet access to that API. So I asked this question on the iOS developer community, Twitter or X, and I want to thank Andrew, I forget how to say his last name, and I believe some other people that had kind of pointed me directly to a modifier within UIViewController called an additional safe area inset. And this is almost as similar as the actual safe area inset within your actual UIView controllers, but in our case, we're saying an additional safe area inset for the view itself. So instead of having things kind of padded between each other and such, this is more where overlapping, like overlays, or for example, picture-in-picture view controller or little tab things should not go over certain areas of that view controller as mentioned. So to get started, we'll actually go ahead and create a file in here, and I'll actually get kind of easy with the file. So I'm gonna go in here and say this is utilities, if I can spell utilities. Okay, great. And pretty much this is going to be simple bridging between SwiftUI and UIKit through the likes of a UI hosting controller and a UI view controller representable. And if you don't know as much as that is, then there's plenty of tutorials online on what it is. For today's video's purpose, we're going to be calling it additional safe area inset. Let's just say modifier, for example. And within here, we're going to go ahead and import SwiftUI, import UIKit, and just do our typical thing here. So funny thing is that this prediction autocomplete with AI within Xcode 16 is super powerful. So we're not going to create a view modifier, it's just the name of it, but I'm going to show you exactly what's going to be happening here. So right now we're going to make a struct called a modifier view representable view. Well, this name is going to be kind of long, but it's not going to be really used outside of the file scope. View representable. So let's say controller representable. I'm trying to let it think. Say it's very smart. The prediction is super cool. Within here, we of course need to specify the UI view controller type. And before we can do that, we actually need to get some generics in here, which we need to specify an actual SwiftUI view. So in our case, we don't really want to use the actual container or like the actual view itself for this button. Like we might wrap it around this button, but it doesn't really respect it in a way. Or if it does, then the buttons start to actually go over that additional safe area. So we're actually going to be doing something where we're going to be going in the background of that button itself. So in our case, we're just going to say UI hosting controller, throw in that generic because it's required of type C, and then get our typical make UI view controller and do some things here, and then of course add in some update view controller. Now it's going to scream at me because the view controller is not yet set up, but actually we have to get some properties in here before we can do all of that. Let's go ahead and say we can make this a private, or I really like to use initializer because it's going to be a view builder anyway. So let's say private let, let's say additional safe area, and that's going to be, we'll do an inset, and that's going to be of type UIEdgeInset. Then of course we need to specify the view we're going to be passing in, which is really just an empty view we're just going to be creating out of a closure, and then just saying private let's root view be a closure, that should be return of type C. We can go ahead now create our custom initializer, in which we're just going to be specifying this here. And then we also need to clean this up because I don't know why it still thinks we're trying to turn off any view, because it doesn't do it that way. We're almost there actually. So we can go ahead and just say let the hosting controller, which of course is a UI view controller that takes in a SwiftUI view, plug in the root view, and of course that is of the property root view. And then thankfully this is a view controller, so you can modify this as much as you want to and then allow it to do other certain things if that's of your forte. But in our case, we're just going to be accessing the additional safe area inset, and as you can see, it lets you modify the view safe area, and that is of course where content should be presented and where certain things go. And then we can just go ahead and just return the hosting controller, and we should be satisfied. All right, and now that we have this set up, we don't have to create custom classes, we don't have to create anything. Everything is pretty much just plug and play. And to make this a little bit nicer, instead of us having to mess around with messy syntax, and maybe we have other views that needs to overlap as well or have different safe area insets as well, we can go ahead and just make an extension of type view additional safe area inset, let's see, inset modifier. You can create a SwiftUI modifier. I just don't really do it all as much because it's too much work. UIEdgeInset, so that's the UIKit edge inset. Then we're going to go ahead and create some view. We're not going to use a view builder because we need to go ahead and make sure this is added to a view. And let's just say return self. And then what we're going to be doing here, as mentioned, we're going to be accessing the background content of this view wherever it's plugged into. So as you can see, this thing is super smart. It has already plugged everything in for me. And yes, go ahead and do that. And the root view, what do we do here? Okay, so actually I think it's a little bit confused. It confused me just a little bit. We're not going to be plugging the self. We're not going to be plugging self into this view. We're going to be plugging just an empty view. And in my, testing, this works fairly well. And actually, we actually do need to specify a view builder right here within the init property on line 29. All right, so now at our test content view, we can go ahead and run up the simulator, and pretty much with the inset, remember that pretty much all around here this is a constant of 50. So the height is 50 and the width is 50. If we want the view or the safe area of the view to go above, just maybe give it some padding, of course, we can do maybe 52 of the inset, and that's super simple. All we have to do is just add that additional safe area inset modifier right here, and wow, I think it almost did it for us. Let's see it. Yeah, wow, look at that. See, the prediction is insanely smart, and I think it might have errored out. Oh, inset. Okay, cool. All right. Well, okay, what's the problem? Oh, we got the UIEdgeInset, right? We got to expose to UIKit. Okay. Yeah, you see, it's getting there. It's almost there. So as you can see, we have a constant of 50 and a height of 50. But when you run this code on device, because simulator actually does not show picture-in-picture properly because certain apps cannot be downloaded onto simulator, it's not going to look exactly well. So I'm going to actually run this on my device, and I'm going to actually go ahead and do a screen recording from there. All right, so as you can see, the picture-in-picture window did exactly respect the safe area or the additional safe area for the button. But as you can already see, the button is still some padding above, which you could probably mess around with just a modifier to make it a little bit nicer. If we're in this navigation stack, this actually works extremely well with views that are supposed to be hidden or they're no longer visible, or if you're hopping and pushing between views. So for example, if we go to another tab like search, I forgot this is the same view, but it still respects the same additional safe area. So if we go now to another content view, as you can see, now it defaults back down to the current safe area, which it should be just the tab bar. But of course, if we go all the way back home, it should go ahead and update, of course, the safe area inset as well, and then update the views accordingly.